All right. For the record, we are recording on January 11th, 2021, starting at 1 o'clock. Soleil, Hanberry-Lizzi recording. And if you could please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Brianna Titone.
All right. And your title, please?
All right. Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm a state representative in House District 27.
Yeah, go ahead and flex. Really get it all out there. All right. So this does not have to start in chronological order, but I'd love to hear about how you grew up. Anything you wanted to say regarding that?
Well, let's see. I grew up in the Hudson Valley in New York, in a pretty small town, mainly agricultural area. So the area around where I grew up was fruit trees, predominantly apples and pears, but there was peaches and plums and cherries and nectarines, and I mean, just about everything. I lived in my grandmother's house, which was a big farmhouse built in 1881. And we lived in their upstairs apartment until I was about probably 10. And we built a house on a subdivided piece of property next door. So we were pretty close to the old homestead, so to speak. And didn't have a lot of neighbors, didn't have a lot of people that I grew up with who were my age. The bus ride to school was about 45 minutes each way. So I, always had to kind of find my own stuff to do and keep busy and entertain myself and stay away from my brother, who sometimes wasn't very nice.
Okay. I have a sibling who's kind of like that too. So,
he's a lot better now.
but yeah. Oh yeah. How's your relationship kind of evolved?
I think it was just kind of being in that isolated place where you had nobody else, and being the younger person, you always want to find out what the older person's doing, and it gets annoying, and I totally get that. But as time went on, once we got into college and beyond, just the maturity levels kind of got better, and we became a lot better friends after that.
And just so I know, what's the age difference between you two?
He's 2.5 years older than me.
Okay. Cool. All right. And so it sounds like that school ride was pretty far away. How was that sort of school experience for you?
Well, the school I went to for elementary school, it was K through 4, and we probably had like a class of maybe 35 or 40 people or something like that in each of the grades. So it was a pretty small group. You pretty much knew everybody. Everybody in the picture had, your class picture, you could fit on a 8x10 and still see everybody's face. Then I went to another school for 5th grade in the larger neighboring town, and then to the middle school for 6, 7, 8. I had friends. I liked science. I was always interested in learning new things. A lot of the curiosity I had, I think, came from being around my grandfather. He was an interesting guy. He traveled around the world, different places, and had lots of artifacts and little trinkets and things like that in his display cases, which I always wanted to kind of learn about and ask about. So uh, I think, his influence on me was pretty strong in trying to allow me to be curious about the world and learning new things uh, and having courage to go out and do stuff. And school was, it was okay. I grew up in the time when the Challenger blew up. I remember watching that on TV. It was a rare occasion when they rolled the TV into the classroom to watch anything. And the space shuttle was a big deal. And I was in second grade, and we were all real excited about it. We were watching the TV, and I mean, we all kind of knew like something wasn't right, and we were all concerned. And the teacher turned the TV off pretty quickly when she realized what happened. But it was, after all the talking and the media and the news on the event afterwards, it was all pretty clear what happened. And I think a lot of people who watched that live, even as young as they were, remember that one.
Mhm. So yeah, sounds like that's something that like stuck pretty hard in your memory there.
Yeah, it was just it was just kind of something like you revere these people who are brave enough to go up into space, and then you just can't even fathom that something like that would happen. It's kind of like your heroes being vaporized in front of you. It's kind of like, what? Like, how could that happen? And, I don't know if I really ever wanted to be an astronaut per se, even though we're talking this topic and I have the Starship Enterprise behind me.
Mhm.
Um, I always was really curious about astronomy and stuff like that, because as small of a school district that we had, the high school actually had a planetarium in it. So we had this planetarium. We had a telescope that didn't work, but we did have a place where we could go look at the stars and inside. And we would always take field trips to the high school in elementary school to go get a presentation by the earth science teacher who would show us all the different stars. And it was like always the highlight of the year for me, because it was just, it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing having all the stars inside. Didn't even have to be cold, which was pretty cool. But I think that's like the ultimate place of curiosity is space, because it's so vast and unknown, and it's always just a little too far out of reach, that you can't touch it, you can't get there, it takes too long, and you have to guess a lot about what's going on.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Did you guys do a lot of stargazing where you were, since it was so rural?
um we on occasion we did. I remember a few occasions when I saw the northern lights at my house in New York. And having never seen them before, I was like kind of, I mean, I've heard about this. Like my grandfather told me, like he went to go see them at some point, and he told me about them, and I was like, that seems like it is, but like here, like how could that be? Um, and yeah, a couple times it happened. I did get to see the Northern Lights in person. You know, really good on a work trip. Probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, up north of Fairbanks,
Oh
which
yeah.
was pretty cool.
Yeah. So did you do a lot of traveling with, what company is this?
Well, I worked for a few different places. I was working. I don't remember if I was working for myself or I was working for the other company. I think I was still working for SRK Consulting. That's the company that brought me here to Colorado.
Hmm.
Um, I'm a geologist. I have a degree in geochemistry and a master's degree. And I was looking for something a little bit more exciting than watching people drill in a parking lot in Binghamton.
Hmm.
So got the job out here, and that's like a whole, there's lots of little anecdotes and stuff to go along with my
Feel
fieldwork stuff.
free. That is 100% what this is for.
I've actually written some of them down. I'm in a book that I started writing a long time ago. I never finished. But my first day on the job with this company, I was on a plane going to Mexico to work, and I had like just moved, and my moving truck hadn't even arrived yet. So all I had was some of my climbing gear and hiking stuff, because I drove across country with my friend uh, to come out to Colorado ahead of the truck. So I didn't have my steel toe boots and all the things that I needed to go on a work site. So I had to wait. I either try to wait for it or go down there, but they couldn't wait. So I had to like just buy new stuff and go down to Mexico. So I don't speak Spanish. I speak very little Spanish even now after all the years of working down in Latin American countries. But at the time, I really didn't speak anything. I had learned Italian and French in school, French in high school and Italian in college. So having to speak Spanish was confusing. But I went to this site that we flew down to Hermosillo, and Hermosillo is in the state of Sonora, and we were going to fly into the site. There's a small airstrip at the mine site. This is like the second week of August, I think. So it's the rainy season in the Sonoran Desert. When it's the rainy season in the Sonoran Desert, it can be quite tumultuous, the weather. There's a lot of thunderstorms that pop up very quickly because of the heat. And so we took off in the plane, and within 10 minutes, we knew that it was not possible to get to the site by plane. So we had to turn around and then get into a truck and then drive 6 hours to the site. So it's very, very remote. It's way, way, way out in the middle of nowhere. And driving through rivers that were dry at the moment, that may not be dry in a moment, driving up on the sides of mountains, all throughout these very hilly places out in the Sonora Desert. And at this, so I get to the site, and I immediately go to the drill rig. So this is an active mine, but we were doing some work to expand their mine to another part of the deposit. So they knew that there was gold there. And what we were there is to drill core holes and analyze the structural stability of the rock. And that helps them design the shape of the pit, how steep they can go, if there's any water, all those kinds of things. So I had never done anything like that before in my life. I basically looked at dirt, you know, soil. We like to call it soil. Dirt's what's in the bottom of your shoes. And so I go to the site, and my coworker who was there, who I pretty much was meeting for the first time, because I mean, this was like, I'd only met a couple of my managers up until this point. He said, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do this, and then I'm going to go to sleep because I haven't slept yet in 32 hours. So you have to learn it quick. And I said, well, I mean, I'm a quick study, but I mean, I want to do this right. I want to screw this up. So, you know, we were going through, and he was showing me how to do all this work. And, you know, he kept saying, can I go to sleep now? Can I go to sleep now? Finally, I'm like, all right, well, you're not going to be much help to me if you just keep asking me, can you go to sleep now? So why don't you just go? And so I completed that shift, the night shift. So I went from traveling all day into the night shift and working the night shift for the next 3 weeks. And while I was there, I mean, I couldn't communicate with the drillers really. You know, they really didn't have anything to do with what I was doing. They just pulled core out of the ground. That was their job. They didn't care about anything else. So when the generator ran out of gas and my lights went out, they really didn't care. They get paid by the meter of core that they pull out of the ground, and not keeping the geologists with lights on. So I had to try to communicate with people in the middle of the night to get gas, and there was not a gas can to be found anywhere in the whole entire mine. So I had to like drive all over the place while these guys are still pulling core out of the ground, and they're not stopping. So every minute that I'm not there, there's a backlog of stuff that's happening. So it was pretty stressful being out there, and the food was really bad. And yeah, I mean, it gets pretty lonely when you can't communicate with people. Because, you know, you can't just have idle chit chat or getting to know people and stuff like that. So at the end of the 3 weeks, we were pretty anxious to go home. And so we knew we were going to be leaving the following day, and we just get all our stuff packed. We get into the truck, and the guy who was driving us, he spoke English. And he said, you see those cows over there? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, well, you got to get them off the runway so the plane can land. And we're like, how do you get cow? What do you do to get cows to move? He goes, I don't know, run after them. I mean, it's a strange request. So we got out of the truck, and we just chased the cows off the runway, and we waited. And then the plane came in just before a thunderstorm. And then basically the person who came in on the plane got off, they took off in another truck, and we were pretty much all sitting there, and the skies opened up. So we got into the plane to take shelter. And I mean, we waited and waited. I have videos of this rain. I mean, it was like coming down. And so the runway is not a runway like at an airport you're used to. It's a dirt strip with grass on it and stuff, with some barbed wire around it to keep the cows in, so they eat the grass in the runway. And there was basically like a stream of water running down the runway, like that. The rain actually created like a small stream, and there was a big puddle at more or less midfield of the runway. Now, mind you, I was a student pilot at this point and hadn't finished my pilot's license, but got very close to it. So I felt comfortable in a small aircraft. So I had no qualms about it. But the problem with this runway was that there were 3 of us and bags, plus the pilot, and the runway was not long enough to generate the lift with all that stuff in it. So I had to stay there with another person, and then one person would go with the bags to go to another airport, a military airstrip, Mexican military. And then we would have to come back and then pick us up and then go back there and then pick us all up and then finally go. It's a rigmarole. I mean, it's still better than driving in a truck for 6 hours. So I was not one of the first people in the plane. My coworker was. He got in the plane and they try to take off, and he hits this puddle of water, and it just engulfs the plane, and the plane like loses control a little bit. So the pilot said, "Well, guess we can't take off because all that water is over there." And we was like, "Well, we'll have to leave tomorrow." And we're like, no, we don't want to leave tomorrow. We want to leave now. And so my coworker and I assessed the situation, and we walked the runway to see where the water was coming from. And we basically like built little diversions with rocks and mud and cow manure and anything we could find to divert the water to dry the runway off. And in about an hour or so, the runway had actually dried up. So we were finally able to take off and leave that place. Well, I went back to that place another 2 times after that. It was not a very good place. There were lots of narcos around there, which had actually shot at our area with a gun a couple times, but nobody was hurt. But this is the kind of stuff that I was like, getting into. I worked. That was my first site I worked at. I worked up in British Columbia on the coast, basically just on the other side of the water from the bottom of the dangly part of Alaska. So we were in bear country over there. I went to that place a couple times. The second time I was there, I was working the night shift, and the daytime drillers thought it would be funny to throw apples in the bushes where we were drilling. And one morning when the sun came up and the helicopter was flying around, we see the helicopter, we're looking up and we're waving, hey, how's it going? These are our friends in the helicopter. And then the helicopter buzzes the bushes probably like 50 feet away from our drill site, and 3 grizzly bears run out of it because the drillers threw bait into the bushes to attract the damn bears. So yeah, there's sometimes there's some sick senses of humor with some of these drill sites. And after all the different places that I've been to, Alaska, the Philippines, I've worked in Ghana and the Congo, and all sorts of other places down in Mexico, even far more dangerous than the other place was. You get, oh, down in Peru and Colombia, you get kind of just like kind of a sense to read people, and you're kind of stuck with them. You're going to be working with them. There's no, you can't just leave. You can't go home. No is not an answer for completing your work. You have to do what you need to do, and just the experience of having to work with different people, different cultures, different languages, um, different interests. It gets you to really understand how to work with people. And I think that really prepared me for the legislature. It wasn't that, I had a dream of being a politician. I never thought I'd ever be a politician. Um, but it was kind of just something that kind of happened, but it was interesting to switch the different skills that I learned in totally different places and apply them to, getting to work with people that may not agree with me, and we may have fundamental differences, but we have common things that we need to do and we need to get done. And that's what I'm all about when I try to do my work in the legislature, is to work with people and make sure that anything else aside, we have a common goal, we have a common interest. Let's work towards that. Let's put those differences aside and shake hands at the end and have a job well done.
Okay, yeah, I, I can definitely see that. Though I am kind of curious, what made you want to switch from geology to politics?
Well, I mean, it wasn't. There was an intermediate step there, but this requires to go back to when I lived in New York. Um, my brother was more into medical stuff. Uh, he was an EMT. We were both lifeguards at some point. We worked at the county pool. Um, but we learned a lot about safety. We took first aid. We took CPR. We were always just kind of people who like to be ready for different situations. And when you don't have anybody else around all the time, you kind of want to feel like you're confident in your skills. So he had joined the volunteer ambulance corps, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." I don't want to do that because I don't want to deal with bloody stuff and people being sick and everything. It's like I'd rather not do that, but maybe the volunteer fire department would be fun. So um, I went down there and I applied, and I was a junior firefighter when I was 16, and learned everything that I possibly could. I took class after class after class after class. Each of the county that we lived in, the county-wide fire prevention board had these classes for firefighters, and you could go to a different fire department around the county and take those classes. So I took just about everything that I could. I drove all over the county to take different classes. And it was fun. It was fun because, when you learn about the science of fire, there's a science component to it. There's a math component to it when you're talking about pumps and pressures and flow rates. There's a strategy to it when you're, approaching a scene, how to look at things, how to identify, what am I going to be in for when I see this structure? Is it an old building? What's the roof construction going to be like? Is it a balloon construction building where the fire is going to run up through the walls? These are all these different things that you learn about that gets you prepared to do your job. And when I turned 18, I was, ready to go into a burning building and do the work. The department that I was in didn't have a lot of calls. We had a huge, we had about a 16 square mile district. Maybe 2,000 people lived in there. A lot of it was orchards. A lot of it was woods. There was one train that went through. We had a few industrial places, but there wasn't a lot going on all the time. But we were given a pager. So it was like a radio one-way communicator that had a speaker in it. And when there was a call, the county would broadcast on a powerful tower signal that would tell the pager to activate, and then it would tell you where the fire was and what type of incident it was and any other information that you need to know. And then you would get in your car and you would put your blue light on top of your roof, which we had special permit from the fire chief signed off to have a blue light, which you could do in New York. And then you would be able to have a courtesy of people pulling over to let you go, because you could be halfway across the district trying to get to where you need to go, and it could take you a lot of time to get there if you're stuck behind some really slow driver who's just looking at the trees. So that's, I rarely ever rode on the fire truck to a scene. We would always drive directly to the scene. We had our gear in the back, in the trunk of our car all the time, all the bunker gear and the helmet and all the other things that we had. Usually we would get the self-contained breathing apparatus off the truck. We didn't have our own of those. And then we would go and do whatever we needed to do. Suit up and, help with the car accident, a fire, whatever it was. When the pager went off, you just go and you do what needs to be done. So, after 7 years of doing that, it was pretty ingrained in me that that service was something I got a lot out of. And as much as I liked science and firefighting, and I have a bit of ADD, and my interests kind of shift, and I go for the shiny object that's there. And I went to college, and I was undeclared when I went to college. So I didn't have any major at all. I just took all of the basic classes that I needed. Anything that was going to be a prerequisite, basically I took. And when they forced me to get a major, I majored in electrical engineering and physics, double major. I was approached in high school by the Navy to be a nuclear engineer. And I said, well, I don't know if I want to be in the Navy for 7 years. And nevertheless, study nuclear physics. And then I ended up studying physics anyway, which was kind of ironic because I didn't really plan on that. But, not joining the Navy, I had a few other reasons because, as a child, growing up, I considered myself to be a cross-dresser because that's all I knew. And would I be able to go into the Navy and bring the things I wanted to wear with me and not have any problems? And I was like, I don't think that's possible. So I don't think I can do that. As much as I liked the opportunity, I liked the service of being in the armed forces and doing, high-tech stuff that the military had. I couldn't do it because I couldn't be myself as much as I was only myself in my own little private space. Like I wouldn't have any space at all. And that was something that I just could not really give up of myself. So the wind blew me out of electrical engineering and physics into geology because I realized that electrical engineering wasn't, I mean, I was interested in it, but I don't know. At that point, I hadn't realized that I wasn't learning the way I needed to. And I was always a pretty smart kid. Like everybody always said I was really smart, but when I looked at my report card, I never got straight A's. So, it always like kind of, I always wondered like, I don't know, what are they talking about? Like, I'm not that smart. There's a lot of kids that get A's and I never get A's. And it wasn't until my 4th year in college, usually that's when people are done. But it wasn't for me. And I was taking chemistry, and chemistry was the first class I ever got an A in. I got a class in Chem 1 and Chem 2. I got an A in both of those classes. And it was because the professor was, I mean, he was like ridiculously difficult. He made us do every freaking problem in the book. Honestly, that's how I got all the grades, because he set it up so you had to do everything, you had to do it right, and you had to get it. And as much as we hated him for that, it was really effective. And this guy had 2 PhDs. He was ridiculous. He was a mad scientist, like for real. And he was only like 35 and he had 2 PhDs. Everyone was like, who is this guy? Why is he working at this small university in upstate New York? But, I learned that repetition was the way that I'm able to learn. And that's when I diagnosed myself with ADD. Because when you get an A in a class, you can tutor it. And I was like, I can make some extra money tutoring. So I went down to the tutoring center, took a seminar on tutoring students with learning disabilities. And they're like, ADD is a learning disability, and ADD is like this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, why are they talking about me? Like they were describing a lot of the things that I'm always distracted and, I don't hear things and it doesn't register and I, get distracted. So it was that kind of epiphany that I said, maybe I should get tested for this or something. So I made an appointment with a psychologist and took their little test and everything. It's the Woodcock-Johnson test. And it's a pretty well-known test. It's like they give you 2 scores. One is a performance score and one is a memory score. And when I took the test, I mean, I still remember one of the questions on the test because the tester told me I was the only person to ever get it right. And it was funny because it was a chemistry question. and it was like, what's the name of this molecule? And it was 1,2-dimethylpentane. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I know what this is. I mean, we just did it not that long ago before the test was done. So I was like, yeah, that's 1,2-dimethylpentane. And then when the test was over, she's like, nobody's ever gotten that question right. Nobody's ever known that. And I was like, well, I mean, it's a little biased. I mean, you could probably take that question off since it was still fresh in my mind. But I ended up, I'm pretty sure I remember I scored a 146 on the performance test and like a 96 on the memory test. And that was really what was difficult for me was, it's not like I can't synthesize things and, figure stuff out. I was always really good at that, but it was memorizing a lot of the fundamentals that was my issue. And learning by repetition was the way for me to get a lot of that information to stick. So get it out of short-term memory into long-term memory. And once I made that adjustment, my grades turned around and I got pretty much straight A's after that. And, it's like, wow, I wish I had figured this out so long ago, because I really didn't learn a lot of the fundamental stuff for a lot of different things because I only absorbed a small portion of it. So, when it came to physics, which I also have a degree in, it was really hard when we got to quantum physics because I had taken calculus and Calc 2 and Calc 3 and differential equations and physics 1 and physics 2 and all these other classes before I really learned how to do it right. So when I got to quantum physics, there were so many holes that I was always struggling to try to fill them and learn all the things that I should have learned and an advanced topic at the same time. So it was a real struggle, and physics really dropped my GPA quite a bit, as much as I got a degree in it. But if it wasn't for me realizing that I had a problem with learning, I never would have gone to grad school. It never would have happened because I would have continued getting mediocre grades and I never would have had a GPA that was high enough. So I owe a debt of gratitude for Dr. White, who's now passed away. Unfortunately, I never really got to catch up with him and tell him that, it was him that really turned everything around for me. It was kind of have a regret about that. But yeah, I ended up with a 3.2 GPA, which if you want to go to grad school, it's like what you have to have. If you don't have that, it's hard. It's really hard to get in. And that was kind of my ticket to go to grad school. And since, my friend said, hey, why don't you apply to grad school? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with grad school. He's like, they'll pay you to go to grad school. Just go. And I'm like, okay. So, I applied and they gave me a scholarship to go. And I went to Stony Brook and I was in a PhD program right away. It's like, hey, you're in a PhD program. But that's kind of just, opportunities would get in front of me and I would kind of take them and not really think that much ahead, just enough that I know that if I take this path of going to grad school, it's not going to be a bad thing. It's like, there's not a lot of bad that could come out of this. So I should probably just do it, So that's kind of how I'm a terrible chess player. As much as I like strategy and stuff like that, like I've been beaten in chess in like probably 3 or 4 moves or something. But when it comes to, making decisions about, how I should kind of take calculated risks in my life and look at opportunities, I think that a lot of the things that I've done have been pretty successful.
Mhm.
That was way off your initial question.
Don't worry about it. I love getting off topic of questions. But yeah, I'd be fascinated to hear more about this. And so you progressed from college, you did your dissertation, and you also got a communications degree at University of Denver.
Well, no, I exactly. I never finished my PhD. I stopped at a master's degree. I was studying rare earth elements and radioactive nuclides in fossils in the Green River Formation, and the dissertation, as it would have been kind of in 2 parts. Would have been the analyzing samples and data and kind of looking at analogs of how things are moving on, computer modeling. And then the next part would actually have been the experimental portion, where I would have gone into the lab and then taken these rare earth elements and radionuclides and actually synthesized the process of fossilization, in a sense, and perhaps even be able to record that process in real time in a synchrotron. So there's ways where you can actually perform an experiment in real time with a high-powered X-ray going through it, and that's the one cool thing about Stony Brook, is that it's by Brookhaven National Lab, and I had some opportunity to work at the synchrotron doing X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy studies. And what I would have liked to have done is to do X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy and Zane's X-ray near edge X-ray. I forget what it stands for now. What you do is you shoot the X-ray into the sample, and you can almost see molecules bonding together and looking at the spectrum that's coming off of it to see what's actually going on in real time. So the ultimate idea would have been to perhaps, and I don't know, I hope somebody else does this at some point, looks at this process to see, if you have a nuclear material that needs to be stored for a long period of time, can we develop a series of chemical techniques that can stabilize it into a substance that can be stored for a really long time? Because if we had uranium and thorium stored in a bone for 50 million years and it hadn't gone anywhere, that's pretty good. If we can store stuff for 50 million years and not have it go anywhere, could be the answer to some of our nuclear material storage problems. That was kind of what I was hoping to accomplish, but I ended up just doing kind of the field work component, making a lot of inferences about the old material and analogs that happen now, natural lakes that have rare earth element signatures that are similar to what the fossils are, but without the experimental portion to see if you can actually achieve the same kinds of patterns in rare earth elements that you would get just by doing these comparisons. You have to actually show it and demonstrate it. So it was a good start to a dissertation, but I never got to finish that. But after grad school, I went and worked for an environmental company in New York. They were actually based out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I did a lot of field work with them, but it wasn't the kind of field work where I go to like Mexico and Alaska. I went to Binghamton, New York, and stayed in a hotel. More than 180 nights in 1 year. I stayed in a hotel. 4 days a week. I would drive up there and I would drive back on Friday, and I would do it every week. And we just had a whole bunch of different things we were always doing: installing monitoring wells, sampling, all sorts of different tasks around this one really big chlorinated solvent site. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and then worked another couple sites in Dutchess County, New York, for the same client. And I was kind of bored with it because I was the last person to get hired in a company that didn't want to grow. So where do you find yourself if you can't move up in a company and find yourself in more leadership role because there's nobody below you? I felt like I was overqualified for the work that I was doing, and I wanted something more challenging. So I decided to either go back to school or find another job. And I found another opportunity. It just so happened that one of the professors whose work I used a lot in my master's degree work had just moved to a different university and became a professor there. And she said, "Hey, I'm a new professor over here and I need grad students. You want to be my grad student?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I applied to Tulane to go there for that. And at the same time, my brother, who lives in Tucson, he said, "Hey, you should get a job down here in Tucson. You should move to Tucson." And I said, "Well, I mean, I don't know. What am I going to do?" It's like, "Oh, yeah, I know this person in this company. You should. They're hiring some people. You should apply." So I said, "Okay, just send me the information." And it wasn't the Tucson office that was really hiring; it was the Denver office that was hiring. And I submitted my application with them, and they gave me a pretty good offer. And at the same time, I had gotten a full scholarship to get my PhD at Tulane, like completely paid for with a stipend. And I was like, do I want to live in New Orleans or do I want to live in the mountains? And that was really kind of what it came down to, is like place where it is. Nothing against New Orleans, but I mean, you're kind of on the ocean, but there ain't no beach around, you know? You're actually underwater, relative to sea level. You're actually negative elevation, relative to sea level. And, it was kind of the same way it was for me when I was in Stony Brook, being like Long Island. There's if you want to get out of Long Island, you have to go through the New York City traffic or take a ferry to leave. So it wasn't exactly like a fun, stress-free place to like escape out of. And so I felt a little bit trapped there. Although looking back at it, I did miss out on all the history that was right around me, that I realized after I watched that show Turn on Netflix, which is really good. While we're talking about history stuff, and now I have to go back and look at all that stuff next time I'm back at Stony Brook. So yeah, I decided not to go get my PhD, and I came here, and looking back at those decisions of what I did to get where I'm at, I think I ended up in a pretty good spot. I think I ended up probably making more good in the world than I ever would have if I got my PhD and became a professor someplace at wherever.
Yeah, so you came out here to Denver to take that job. Around what year was that?
2008.
2008. Okay, cool. Um, Moved to Denver to take this job, and then did you stay in Denver for long, or did you sort of do this job for a while and then do something else?
No, I was always here in the Denver metro area. I was in Arvada the whole entire time. Uh, I was staying with a friend for a few months until I was able to buy my condo, and and then I bought my condo, and I've been in Arvada ever since.
Okay, cool. All right. So you do all this amazing stuff. You're at a geology company for quite some time, and then you start to make this transition into politics. Like, what sort of
Ah,
motivated?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's actually that middle step that we didn't talk about yet.
yeah.
So when I was in college, I went to State University of New York at New Paltz, and it's basically at the foothills of the Catskill Mountains, and like, all right, mountains, whatever. They're not really mountains. They're mountains for there, um, but we weren't that far from New York City, really. And a lot of the people that I went to school with um, were from New York City. They had people, who lived in their families who lived and worked there. I had been to New York City a lot of times as a kid and throughout my life on field trips and, outings with the family to go see a show and stuff. So, New York City was like the only city I really ever knew. It was the city, like it's the city. It'll always be the city. And when the attack on 9/11 happened, um, I got into, I was actually working that morning. I worked in the network lab in the engineering department. And I went into my boss's office and he said, "Did you just hear what just happened?" And I was like, "No, I don't know. I wasn't listening to the news." He goes, "A plane has hit the World Trade Center." And I'm like, "What?" It's like, wow, that's crazy. And it wasn't like as heavy hearted as like, oh, a plane's probably just hit the World Trade Center. And then, after a little bit more time went by and, then the other plane hit. And so we're like, whoa, what's going on? And so we walked over to the lecture center where they have, a gigantic, it's like a movie theater practically, is with a giant screen in the front. And they had television being played on it, and they had the news of the towers there. And everyone was kind of chattering with each other, like, we don't know what's going on. It was still like there was so little information, we just didn't know. And then the towers fell, and we watched it on this screen, like this 20-foot screen. I mean, it was huge. So, I mean, it felt kind of like you were there. It felt like you were there watching the building fall down. It was very emotional because there were a lot of people really worried about their loved ones who who worked around there. Didn't know if they could get a hold of them. So there was a lot of chaos going on. At that time, I was a volunteer firefighter. I would have gone in that building if I was a firefighter. I worked there to try to help people. And a lot of the same people who had that job lost their lives there. So I kind of took it personally, this whole thing. It was just like, not only is it like it's an attack on our country and then innocent people who are in a building just going to work, but the people who went in to help them and save them and they lost their lives. So it just really stuck with me that this had happened, and I was like, I never want to see that ever happen again, and I don't know what to do to help make that happen. So I again toyed around with the idea of the military, but I couldn't do that. um, so I thought that maybe being in the FBI was something that I could do to prevent that. I could be in anti-terrorism, and I could take down terrorist cells and stop this from ever happening again. So that idea kind of got in my head at that point. And I was a college kid. I didn't have any experience really doing anything. Um, so I was vastly unqualified for that. So I kind of put that on the shelf and just went about my business for a whole bunch of years until I got out here to Colorado, and I like the bug got me again, and I was like, I think it's time that I start looking into this again. So I put my application in, and because I had at the time 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree. I had student pilot, I had scuba certification, lots of rock climbing experience, lots of different things. I mean, I had some international travel at that point, which I really hadn't had much at all up until I got that job. But I was like, I think it's time. I think I could be a really good basically a detective. And it's like I thought like I could go the route of being a police officer and then being a detective, but I didn't want to be the police officer part. I didn't want to write people tickets. I didn't want to do like that kind of stuff. I just wanted to go figure out the stuff that's hard to figure out. And so the FBI came back and said, you're most competitive in all of our candidates. You're in that pool. So started that whole process of going in for the interviews and finding out the information, and then learning about the whole process and the physical tests and the other tests you have to take. And so the first interview that I had to go do, I was supposed to fly to the Philippines. Like, they don't tell you very soon. Well, my job didn't tell me very soon I had to go to the Philippines either, but the FBI doesn't tell you with much notice that you get your interview, your first interview. So like I had these two things pop up at the same time, and I'm like, well, if I tell the FBI I can't make it this time, are they going to give me another opportunity, or am I going to have to never do this? So I told my boss, I said, hey, is there any way like I can postpone this trip like one day, just like push it out like one day? And he's like, well, why? And I'm like, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that. And I have a hard time being dishonest to people about stuff because you have to keep covering your tracks all the time. So I told him, I said, well, this is really important to me. I've been thinking about joining the FBI for a really long time, and this is my opportunity to do this. And then he said, oh, well, no, you still have to leave. And so the FBI did give me another opportunity to do the interview, but I also basically got fired over that because I told them that I basically didn't want to work there anymore. So they gave me like a couple months notice and pay to basically say find another job. So that was kind of how that job ended. I went to the Philippines. I did the work there. I was there for 5 weeks. Um, really, that was a really fun, kind of a fun, because I usually don't get to go in a hotel. It was actually like in a real hotel and not in some camp in the middle of nowhere. Um, but yeah, met a lot of really nice people, had a good time. But when I got back and finally got the appointment to um, do the interview, I had to find another job. I had to like figure out what to do. So my friend he had started his own consulting company, uh, probably not more than a year prior to this. And he was just contracting with companies like the company that fired me. So, he kind of gave me a little bit of information on how to do it. And I filed all the paperwork with the state, started my own company, made a new website, and started working for myself as a consultant. I had a little more flexibility because I picked my own jobs. I didn't always get a chance to have the freedom to say no because you work when you work, and when you don't work, you don't get paid. So you have to work as much as you need to pay your bills. So it is a bit stressful at times when you don't know when your next job's going to be, and you're stretching that money out like a little farther than you want. So the FBI process is very long. It's very drawn out. And, ultimately, I turned 37 before I could get into the academy. And that dream of that job was kind of went away. It was no longer obtainable. I thought that maybe I could join the military to get my age limit extended just so I could do it. But I was just like, what am I doing? There's a reason this happened. I just need to give up on this and move on. And it was a turning point in my life because that's when I decided that it was time for me to actually look at myself and what I needed. And it's like I always want to help people. I always want to do stuff for other people and do stuff for other people and do stuff for other people and save the world and not focus on me and not do the things that they're going to help me. And this was an opportunity for me to help me. So that's when I went and talked to some people at the Gender Identity Center. And that's when I came out as being trans, because I've been holding that back for jobs and opportunities and all the things that I might lose because of who I was if I was actually that person. And when I lost the opportunity with the FBI, I felt like that was the thing that I wanted so much. And it was gone. Just like that, it was gone. So what else is there? Who cares? It's gone. Now what? Now do something different. Now reinvent yourself, quite literally, but not really. And that was the opportunity for me to actually understand what it was that I needed. And hearing so many people's stories about losing people, losing jobs, losing opportunities, really having a hard time coming out, it was, it was always seemed like it was a possibility that that could happen to me too. But, I had surrounded myself with people who I felt like, cared about me and accepted me. And I knew that I wasn't going to be out in the cold if something really bad happened and things really went south. And, little did I know that, this was going to actually open up doors for me. And I thought that I didn't imagine that was going to be possible. So, I came out, and when I did, I realized, like, hey, I'm part of a group of people who are really being kicked around. And I just wanted to be an FBI special agent to kick people around who are doing bad stuff. I'm not going to stand up for people being bullies and doing bad stuff. So I need to step up for my community that I'm part of now. And that's when I started to pay a little more attention to LGBTQ issues, especially ones in Colorado, and then went down to the Capitol for a lobby day with One Colorado, and set foot in the Capitol for the first time after living in Colorado almost 10 years. And then, that kind of activism and standing up and doing stuff like that just started to snowball a little bit. And I got involved with the Jefferson County Democrats, and they had an LGBT caucus, and we were, talking about the conversion therapy ban bill. And I said, well, what if we get some towns to do it? What if we get some cities to do it? And then we'll have some momentum. So kind of started, doing grassroots organizing on getting towns to do proclamations against conversion therapy, just to kind of have more things to bring up, because the bill kept getting killed over and over again. Well, got to try something different. You can't just expect the same thing to happen. At least try something different. And of course, the bill ended up getting killed anyway. But it was that work that I was doing, and the leadership that I was showing, doing that kind of stuff, that the chair of the county party said, you should run for office. And I'm like, who's going to vote for me? Like, I'm a trans person. Like, no one elects people like me. Like, it's, especially where I live, it's very conservative. People wouldn't do that. And so she said, well, I mean, you've got a lot of qualifications. You've got a lot of things going on. I think you're very qualified. You can do it. And I said, well, I don't know. I'll think about it. And then, that was like the summer of 2017. And, I had seen that Danica Rome was running for office in Virginia. And that was like, everybody was talking about that. That was pretty big news everywhere. And, she ended up winning that election in 2017 by a pretty decent margin. So, in my mind, after looking at the district that I lived in and the timing of it, and, really being strategic and calculating the risk, it seemed like that even in my district in the 2016 election, the Democrat Hillary Clinton won by, I think it was like 12 votes or something like that, which is, hardly any at all. But hey, a win is a win. So just based on that and Danica Rome winning in Virginia, I said, all right, well, I mean, what harm could it do? All right, I'll do it. You know, so I declared to run in December of 2017. And, you know, I started taking the classes with Emerge Colorado, and then with the Victory Institute, and then just started asking everybody. And it was surprising how few people really were really excited about it as much as I was. Because, you know, I mean, my district, House District 27, was drawn to be a Republican district and after the 2010 census. And it was. I mean, the Democrat who came in running for re-election was not re-elected again, even with the power of the incumbency. I was running against the incumbent Republican. He had won by 14%, I think it was, with a third party candidate in a three-way race. So, yeah, everybody said, oh, you're running for House District 27, huh? Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, you're not going to win. I mean, they wouldn't usually tell me that to my face, but that's what they were thinking. That's what they, I mean, some people later told me after I won that, you know, sorry I didn't support you. I didn't think you were going to win. And it's like, well, you know, you can always do it next time. I mean, you know, obviously I didn't need your support this time, but next time, why don't you make sure you step up? So that was kind of how I ended up running for office.
Very interesting. I'm glad you ended up winning. You did a tremendous job, especially flipping a Republican county. But it does sound like realizing you were not cis was a pretty big part for you, a pretty big thing for you. So throughout your life, were you like sort of interrogating this part about yourself, or was it sort of like a more
I missed like a little bit. You froze.
oh, okay. Okay. Was it just kind of a stark revelation, or had you kind of like always been building up to that point?
I mean, I'd always been kind of building up to it. I think there was always just something that was kind of dragging behind me that was pulling me away from the direction I was going. It was either, you know, a job, like, you know, could I have been an FBI agent who was trans? Like, I don't think so. I don't know of any who are. You know, relationships were always things that always got me afraid that I couldn't be who I was because nobody would want to be with me. And, you know, if I was honest with myself and with them, would they want to stick around or would they not? And so every time you make a decision that, you know, kind of postpones the inevitable, you keep kicking the can down the road and thinking, well, I've lived my inauthentic life this way for this long. What's a little longer? You know, if I have to, because you don't know what's on the other side of that door. It's like I'm taking what I know and what I'm comfortable with, and I'm giving it up behind what's done behind door number one, or what's behind the curtain for the game show analogy. It's like, I already know what I have. It's pretty good. I can deal with it. It's not what I really want, but is what I'm gonna get? Is it gonna be better? Is it gonna be worse? Am I prepared for that? Am I in a place in my life where I can accept something that might be, a sadder reality, or a lonelier reality? And that's a really tough decision to make. And I mean, I think that's why a lot of people have a hard time coming out, because they kind of get stuck in something that they've made work, and just keeping going with it, because there's so many things out of my control that I can't. Am I ready for that? Am I ready to get into that space where anything can happen, and it's kind of just crazy?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely say that I've had similar experiences to that. Has it been like, what's the difference been since you've come out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely have experienced a lot of the things that people talk, that I've read about and heard about, before. The experience of being a woman in a male-dominated world. The experience of being a trans person, and trying to get people around you to adapt to you being a different person. Like coming out at work was a bit of a challenge to me. I work at a software company, a small software company, and I had to, for a long time, I was like, okay, well, this has got to be the place where it happens. Let me kind of like, have little conversations with everybody in different ways, so I can gauge how they're going to react to this. How are they going to treat me? What do I have to look out for? What red flags are there going to be? It's like, it's exhausting being a trans person at times, because you always have to think of all of these other things before you even open your mouth. Before you reveal something about yourself. It's like, my voice was always a big issue for me. When I was running for office, I was going to voice coaching and training, and I wasn't really ready when running for office came about. I didn't have time to get it down, and I had to decide whether I was going to try to stick with what I learned and change my voice the way I would prefer it to sound. But the weird thing was that I didn't even like the way I sounded, because it sounded like I was being fake. Even though I don't like the sound of my own voice, I didn't like the sound of the voice I was trying to put on. So I didn't like either one. And I felt inauthentic hearing myself. So how would other people perceive me if I was going to be inauthentic in how I sound? And then not being able to speak in a way that was consistent would really make me seem inauthentic to people. So I had to really come to grips with that and say, Well, what you see is what you get. What you hear is what you get. This is me. And when I did my first speech at the caucus in 2018, I said, "Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brianna Titone. Let me just address the elephant in the room. I'm a trans person. Now that that's over with, let's address the elephant in the district and what we're going to do to get rid of him and elect me." And it was just because I knew that if people had not talked to me or met me before, and nobody knew who I was, nobody knew, because I was traveling most of the time. I lived in Denver, so I wasn't around. I mean, I filled up 2 passports the time I was here in Denver, and the time that I was home was spent myself trying to be myself. So I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have a lot of people in my network. I really didn't know anybody. So now I had to go and win everybody over, everybody. And, I had to just pull those skills I talked about earlier about, my skills as a consultant working with people in different places, and use those skills to win people over, get things done, and say, hey, I know things are hard right now, but don't worry, we can do this together. If we work hard, we do this, and just using that. But I knew as soon as I opened my mouth up and I spoke, and I didn't tell people I was trans, there would be all these little conversations on the side saying, "Is a candidate trans? Like, what's with the voice? What's going on?" And so I just nipped that in the bud right away and just said, "Look, I'm a trans person, okay? Like, let's get down to business here." And a lot of people, even years after that speech, remembered that speech, which was really important when you're trying to to win people over and get them to believe in you and trust that you're going to do the right thing. So yeah, that there's a lot of struggles that I've had to go through, as a candidate, as just as a person in life, thinking about, where am I going to go? Where am I going to park? Oh, this neighborhood looks a little weird. What if I get approached by somebody on the street? How is that going to play out? And I feel like, the work that I've done, the being a firefighter, the desire to be an FBI special agent, even though I wasn't taught skills there, I've kind of been somewhat of a student of it on the outside. Just kind of learned a lot about that situational awareness, and being sure that you know what's going on all the time. Not to say that it's paranoia, but it's just like I've had a heightened awareness about myself, where I am, who's around me, who I can trust, who I can go to if something happens, who's potentially going to be a problem here. I mean, it's not, cis people don't have to think about that. They just go about their lives. And my brain has to go work overtime all the time. And I guess having a little ADD helps in that respect, because I don't have to shut it off. I can always keep aware and look around, see what's happening, and I think that that's kind of been a survival tool that I've had, being that I've had a stash of clothing I didn't want anybody to find, that I got really good at concealing and making sure that people didn't find out, and making sure that I was aware of what I was wearing, when I was wearing, where I was going all the time. and making those very strategic decisions every time I went anyplace. Because the idea of having somebody find out, that's the embarrassment, just being, who knows? I mean, you don't know. You just don't want it to happen, because you don't, it's like Pandora's box opening up. You don't know what's in there, what's going to happen. It could be the worst thing ever, and you just can't risk it.
Yeah, I mean, I, as a trans person myself, I completely understand what you mean. Has it played into your, how is it like, how's it kind of like, did it affect you like early on, or has it just been sort of now?
Has what affected me? Because you broke up again.
Oh, just sorry. Just the sort of feeling of feeling weighed down. Was it mostly sort of a pressure that started to be felt like later on, like around 2016 and around when you were in Denver, or was it sort of an omnipresent thing?
Um, well, I mean, I think it was always there, even before I got to Colorado. Um, and the funny thing is that when I came out in 2015, and then I ran for office in the end of 2017. So it was like 2 years later, I was already running for office, and then a year later, I had won. So I hadn't really had the trans experience that most people have, because I was granted this elevated status of being a representative. And when you have a title like that, even when people think you're the bane of their existence, they still treat you better than they would if you weren't a representative. So you get treated a little bit differently because of the title. And it's not like I miss not miss being treated worse for longer. I kind of feel a little guilty about not having the normal experience that trans people have living their normal lives, because I never lived a normal life as a trans person, because I did this. And now and forever, I will be treated probably a little bit differently, because I always have this title that follows me around. But even the time that I wasn't a candidate or representative, I am very much aware of the struggles and all of the things that people go through. And that's why I want to be someone who can be there to lighten the load. And I have to take on a lot of other responsibility, not just because I'm a trans person, not just because I'm in the most competitive House district in the entire state that I won by the smallest margin of anybody, because I have to set an example. I can't be a buffoon and do and say dumb stuff, because that reflects badly on trans people. I could ruin it for everybody if I screw up. So there's a lot of extra pressure there. I get a lot of people saying a lot of bad stuff about me, and I'm sure it's not much different than people get on Facebook and Twitter and everything else. But it's like, I read the comments, I know I'm not supposed to, but that's me being situationally aware. It's me protecting myself because nobody else is watching that. And I want to know if somebody wants to hurt me before, they do it. So I can protect myself, because I don't want anything to happen to me, because I don't want that to be a bad precedent either. And so there's a lot of angles you can look at it, where, being in this position is always like, it's a very high stress. It's a very high stress job. But I mean, look where I came from. All my field work that I used to do. I mean, after working the night shift without knowing how to speak anything, and then chasing the cows off the runway and building a dam to divert the waters just so you could go home. I mean, that most people could never go through that. They could never, they would abandon that in a second. And for some reason, I have a high tolerance for abuse and discomfort, I guess. and I'm happy to be here to take that if it helps change the world, which is what I always wanted to do. I was like, I wanted to change the world for as long as I can remember, and I didn't know how that was going to happen. I thought maybe I would be a professor and come up with some discovery which would change science, or I don't know what. Or if I was an FBI special agent and I stopped an attack which, saved the lives of people who cured cancer. I mean, who knows? Whatever it was, didn't matter. I wanted to do something that had a lasting positive legacy that came after me. And that's why I do everything that I do every day, because I'm only going to be here for a certain amount of time, and I got to make the most of it. I don't want to squander this time that I have here. It's too important. And I mean, I don't necessarily believe in fate or anything, but here I am. There were a lot of different directions I could have gone, but I'm here. I'm here today. And I have been bestowed this responsibility, and I'm gonna fulfill that responsibility. I'm gonna do my job as a representative and serve the people in my district, and I'm also gonna be a role model and set a good example and pave a road for people like you and me to have a better future.
I would say
Why
you
not?
certainly, yeah,
Why wouldn't I?
yeah, yeah. And I'd certainly say that you've done that, like with a lot of the legislation you passed. Um, how has your experience been as a trans legislature in sort of legislature? How has that been with sort of your colleagues?
Uh, also an interesting thing, because I mean, you ask the political people who followed the 2018 election, I wasn't supposed to win. It was impossible. It wasn't supposed to happen. And, so, my experience of being a legislator is not different just because I'm a trans person. It's different because, like, I didn't win on election day. I won on Saturday after election day. Nobody else had to go through that. And I'm sure that if anybody else did, they would also be treated a little bit differently. It's kind of like, do you belong here? Do you really belong here? Because, like, you weren't supposed to win. Like, we didn't plan for this. We don't know what to do with you. It's hard. I don't think people deliberately, treat me that way, but that's the vibe I get. My first term, especially my first session, was just like, oh, well, I mean, we're glad you're here, but just now we have to deal with a trans person and all the things that come along with that. It's like, I don't know, it's like another responsibility all of my cis colleagues have to deal with now. Like now we have somebody else we have to stand up for. And I think that's, I mean, a lot of them already were. But, if anybody was kind of like on the fence about it, now they had a colleague who was, even whether they're Democrat or not. And then I also had to deal with the people who are running bills that, undermine my very existence. And be nice to them and run bills with them and stuff, which I did. And, it's a really weird dynamic sometimes, because, people just don't, I don't know, they just don't know what to do. It's like, there's nothing different. It's just, I'm your coworker. We're doing a job. We're doing the thing. We're making laws. We're making things happen. It's like, it's no big deal. And then, my other colleagues, they on the other side of the aisle, they kind of just they would go out of their way to ignore me or not say hello, even though I say hello to them. Some of them would go out of their way to misgender me, deliberately on TV, and I mean, what do I do at that point? Do I get mad and I start screaming, yelling at them and making an example out of it? In a way, yeah, I would want to. I want to do that, but it's like, they do it just enough that, oh, it was an accident. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. There was never any chronic abuse. It was just enough to be a jerk and not enough for me to call them out on it. Even though some of the reporters did. Some of the reporters did point it out. And I appreciate that because, I shouldn't have to be the person who stands up for myself all the time. Just like Black people shouldn't have to stand up for Black people all the time. And Latino people shouldn't have to stand up for Latino people all the time. It's not the responsibility for us to always have to stand up for our own rights. And I think that, Colorado was ready to have a trans legislator because they had passed enough laws and had enough conversations and already put a lot of the groundwork in. So my experience wasn't anywhere near the same as what Danica Rome went through. I talked to her, and she was in the minority her first 2 years, so she really took a lot of abuse, and that makes a difference. Who was in charge? But I think that a lot of people, have gotten to know me as a person now, and I think that that's really what, it's exactly what I've been trying to do in this position, is to normalize people like us doing stuff, doing anything we want, anything we're qualified for, anything that we want to do. It doesn't matter. Like, we're people. We have ambitions and drive and motivation to want to do stuff, and we should be able to do it. If we're part of a team and doing things that are right, let's do it. Let's make that happen. Let's show everybody that we should have a seat at the table just like everybody else. And, you know, stop, you know, trying to put us down all the time. It's like, it's ridiculous. Like you're very selfish right now. Don't do that. Stop. Just let us live our lives. Thank you.
Yeah. I think you're definitely like right. It's quite frustrating to have to stand up for yourself all the time. The I suppose I'll try to kind of pivot a little bit towards something a little less charged. But what were your impressions of coming to Colorado in 2008? How did you find the state then?
I mean, you know, I was an avid outdoors person, especially back then. Doing like trail running and rock climbing and mountain biking and you know, all sorts of stuff like that. So really, that was like one of the big motivators for me to be out here in Colorado, is that I have access to all of these different places. I do some photography. This is a photograph I took behind me in Peru, and you know, so it's like there's a lot of things that really meld with my interests that were here to Colorado. As far as like political stuff and anything like that, I mean, honestly, I didn't know anything was going on really. In fact, in 2008, I didn't even vote in the presidential election, not because I wanted to skip it, because I had never skipped that. It was because I didn't get my I had to get an absentee ballot, and I couldn't get it in time because they sent me on some trip. They sent me to the Philippines, I think. No, they sent me to, where'd they send me? They sent me someplace. No, they don't know where they sent me. They sent me someplace. And I was like, wait a minute, I have to vote. Like you can't send me out to some place where I can't vote. Like I need to vote. And they said, well, it's too late. We don't have a choice. You have to go. And you know, and I was really upset about that. It was like the first time I had never voted. And you know, it's not that I didn't pay any attention to politics. It was just kind of background noise back then. It wasn't something that I paid that much attention to. I did start listening to some political radio shows and stuff like that when I was before coming to Colorado. When I was sitting in a car driving to Binghamton every week, I spent a lot of time listening to the radio. So I did listen to some stuff, but it wasn't like I was really passionate about. And you know, I didn't really know the state of anything really here because I wasn't even around. I was down in Mexico. I was up in Canada. I was in the South Pacific. I was in South America. I was any place else but here. So I didn't even know what was going on in the news. It wasn't until probably like 2014 that I stopped doing the field work. And I stopped doing the field work and got into software. And that's when I finished my second master's degree in information communication technology, focusing on software development at DU. And I started that program because I didn't want to travel so much, because I was like, I wanted to establish myself here. And I felt like an outsider. I would meet people and I would go on a trip, and then, you know, they would it was like we would never meet up because they never knew I was home. And then I would say, hey, I'm home. And they're like, yeah, well, we're going someplace. And it was just really inconvenient. It was a really inconvenient lifestyle. As much as I enjoyed the traveling and the adventure of it, um, I felt like I wanted something more stable. So that I got the job doing software development. Uh, I got turned down by a lot of different jobs, and it was, right around the time I was coming out and being trans, and I'll never know if I was unqualified or trans for not getting the job. I'll never know.
Yeah.
And it always bothers me. um, but yeah, I mean, Colorado was what it was, and I really find myself fortunate to have landed here because of all the things that people have done up to this point for protections for the LGBT community. Because I didn't pay a lot of attention to LGBT anything. I mean, think about it. If you were a military guy and you liked building doll furniture, you wouldn't want anybody to know you had a subscription to Doll Furniture magazine because people would discover your secret, So, part of my disguise in, being a cross-dresser or trans, I denied myself being trans for a long time because I thought being a cross-dresser was less bad at the time. I just didn't. It just didn't know. I didn't know enough about it. I didn't want to even know anything about it because the less I knew, you got plausible deniability. Like I don't know anything about that, and that's part of the disguise of being someone who you're not. Is like I don't know anything about that. And then I missed out. I missed out on a lot of stuff. I missed out on a lot of the history making. I missed out on learning about someone who I came to really find as an awesome person and a friend for a very short time, Monica Roberts. I met her a couple of years ago, and just learning about all the things that she's done for the trans community, and now her life is gone. I wish I had known more about her accomplishments and everything. But I'm glad that what we have been doing in the legislature is really making sure that the history of LGBTQ people is being taught because, unless you take a class in college on it, you don't learn this stuff. Unless you do the research on your own, you're not going to be exposed to this stuff. It's really easy to avoid. And it's a shame because even if you're not an LGBTQ person, it's all part of history. It may not be your history, but it's someone else's history. It's someone else that their history. And why it's important that all these things happen because, someone that has rights now. That's something that's really, I'm finding a lot more value. I was never really a scholar in history, and now that I really think about it, it was because I couldn't remember this stuff because I didn't know how to study it. And it was just like, a bunch of dates and stuff. Memorizing this stuff is stupid because I couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. If I knew how to do it, it would have been a lot more fulfilling and interesting. And now that I know about, what I need to do to really appreciate the history and memorizing things and why it's important, history is definitely becoming something that's more important in my life. And I think that's why, you know, politics is like, I mean, history is politics. Politics is history, no matter what. There are politics in every aspect of any ancient civilization, and you know, everything that we do. And now I'm part of that. So if I'm gonna be part of it, I better start learning this stuff. Because I'm not going to be a good part of history if I don't make sure I don't repeat it in a bad way, and learn from the people who came before me and honor those achievements, because I think that's really important.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's really great to hear. I mean, speaking of history, how has the experience of the coronavirus been from the perspective of the legislature and from your very unique position?
Well, you know, I kind of look at this in a couple different ways. Well, I mean, I would say three different ways, really. It's like a scientific way, being a scientist, even though I'm not like, you know, a biology scientist, I still kind of look at things a little bit similarly to scientists. I look at the history of what happened, especially, I mean, we have the Spanish flu as a great example. Um, and then we look at this layer of politics that goes on top of it, and how, you know, you have something that happened, you have clear descriptions of what they did to mitigate it, to make it stop, and we didn't do it. We could have done the same things that they did in 1918 to help mitigate it, but people fought against it. And, you know, that's history, like, not being a good exam. History could have taught us a lot of that stuff, and it didn't. I mean, people brought it up, and politics was the blanket that distorted the science. It distorted history. It distorted everything. And it's, you know, I never really had a full appreciation of what politics is really like until I got into it. It's so easy to be on the outside and look in. And, you know, it's like if you were looking into a kitchen and you're just looking through the window and you see a bunch of people doing stuff, but you can't hear them. You can only kind of see what they're doing, but you only see the backs of them sometimes. And, you know, they're producing things, but you don't know like how it's being done. I mean, the old analogy, how the sausage is made, with politics, you realize that, you know, there's so many layers to it, and reality doesn't always meld well with politics. And I'm sure that if I was a better scholar of political history, I probably would have found plenty of examples that were similar to what's happening now. But I'm learning all this stuff kind of firsthand about how politics really blankets and distorts everything. It's kind of disheartening, and you know, it's like, as much as we want to try to do the right things, people are fighting against the right things, fighting against science, fighting against common sense, what seems to be common sense, just being sort of looking at things in a monetary way instead of a human life, you know, putting no value on people's lives because we have to have businesses open. We have to have businesses open. I'm like, well, what good is a business if there's nobody to buy from it? And you know, as much as you try to tell people that, they brush it off, and they come up with some whatever reason there is that doesn't make any sense. Like that's not how it is. Well, it's not how it is because we're actually doing things to mitigate people dying, and that's why. Like if we had done nothing, if we wanted to do it your way, we would be in a much different situation here. But you know, change is hard. Change is really hard. Politics is all about change, and it's hard.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Yeah. Um, well, in that case, I guess what have your opinions of the community of, Denver and Colorado sort of appeared like to you? What have your opinions been on that?
It's like the Denver area in general.
Colorado, Denver, what you've seen in your time here?
Well, I mean, I've definitely seen the growth. That's definitely been really apparent. Just the street that I used to live on when I first moved, I moved into a new condo, and it was connected to this 2-lane road that was all kind of like a shady tree covered road, and felt kind of cozy, and there was cows and stuff around. And then over time it just, it ended up getting widened to a 4-lane road with no trees and less cows, uh, and that's just in Arvada. There's some places that have really, really changed, especially over in the Commerce City, Thornton area, the growth to the north, all the farmlands. Like I experienced a lot of the same kind of stuff where I grew up in New York, with going back and seeing a lot of the orchards that we used to drive past, having houses on them all, and all those trees going away, and the farming and just being moved away. There's a funny thing. The farmer who owned the property next to us got his property from the King of England.
Oh, wow.
Like they've actually looked at the deed going back to like the 1600s or something like that. I forget the exact date, but it was actually like a land grant from the King of England, and they've owned that property for so many generations. Like that family is, and even my generation, the kids that I went to school with are still farming that land, and that gives me hope. I grew up, I'm a suburban person here, but I grew up in a rural area, and I appreciate the rural slow stuff. A lot of the legislators who saw me on the Rural Affairs and Agriculture Committee didn't really give me a lot of credit for that. They really didn't know what my roots were like, and it's a different kind of agriculture than we do here. The scale of it is just so much more massive. It was very much small family farm back where I'm from, but I like that aspect of Colorado, that we're very in tune with the land and the things around us, and the environment and the water, and there's just seems to be like the people have a really great appreciation for what we have here, and being good stewards of this land that we have here. So I think that's something I definitely saw when I moved here to Colorado, is that there's a lot of passion. And I think a lot of that passion comes from all that sunshine, all the that vitamin D everybody's getting. People seem to be a little happier here, and it's definitely worked for me. I've definitely been a happier person here than I've been anywhere else.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I mean, I assume the rural differences between New York and Colorado are pretty stark. Did you ever want to stay on that sort of rural area in New York, or was it always sort of a push towards college?
Well, I mean, I went to college locally, so I drove to college. So I lived in in my parents' house for basically until I went to grad school. Um, it was a lot cheaper to do that, and we weren't of any extravagant jobs or anything. We we're frugal and did what we had to do. We did a lot of our own cooking. We used, had a garden. We grew a lot of our own food. Um, I mean, some of the farms in New York are big, huge farms and, the big fields, but where I'm from, more in the Hudson Valley area, it's a lot smaller, especially on the west side of the Hudson River. The west side of the Hudson River is more hilly, and a lot of drumlins from the glaciers that dropped off. So it was more suitable for fruit trees and things like that, more so than like corn and grain crops and stuff like that. A lot more of the grain crops were grown on the other side of the Hudson River in Dutchess County. But there was still a lot of forest land. Just a lot of small little homesteads. That's the real big difference between Colorado and there, is that that area of New York is the land grant from the 1600s. I mean, these were the pioneer people of the East that stole their land from the Native Americans. Not to be glib about it, but they had small little homesteads and establishment there, where over here, it was like this big, vast, wide expanses of land, especially in the east part of Colorado, where it's just, huge flat expanses. And then into the mountains, where you have these valleys in the mountains, where, quite different kinds of terrain that New York has, even though New York is very diverse. Our mountains are tiny, but they are somewhat plentiful. The largest park in the country, I think it still is the Adirondack State Park. The Adirondack State Park's bigger than Yellowstone, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Huge portion of state of New York is Adirondack State Park.
Did you visit that often?
Yeah.
So you mentioned you did a lot of outdoor, like hiking and climbing. Where have been some of the places you've visited in Colorado?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of. I used to run a lot more when I started. Then I started running for office, so I did a different kind of running. But I used to run quite a bit up in Boulder. I had a group of friends up there. We used to run all the trails and all the different peaks around there. Up in, by Netherland in the National Forest and the Divide trails, a lot a lot of running up in there. I've done, think I have 11 14ers that I've gotten so far. But my first one was Long's Peak, which usually is not like a good first one to do, even though it's like, oh yeah, it's in Rocky Mountain National Park. It's not that far away. It's a hard one. It's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to do. I mean, you know, granted, at the time when I did that, it was pretty easy because I was in like probably tip-top shape. When I was training for the FBI test consists of 4 events. It's sit-ups, a 300-meter sprint, push-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. You do those all in order with a 5-minute break in between each event. So you're exerting yourself as hard as you possibly can for that event. You get basically just enough time to catch your breath, and then you're doing the next event. And you have to score, you know, high enough points to qualify. So, and I have to go back and look at my score, but trying to remember off the top of my head. I think I had 59 sit-ups in a minute. I did the 300-meter, which is a weird amount, and I think it was 42 seconds. And then I did 47 push-ups continuously. And then I did the 1.5 miles in 11 minutes and 3 seconds. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I did 17 pull-ups consecutively after that because I was trying to qualify for the SWAT team.
Mm.
So at the time, I was in pretty good tip-top shape. So, you know, running, you know, doing a 14er like that was not that big of a deal. Where this picture behind me is around 17,000 feet of elevation.
Wow. So did you, some of the places did you visit, did you also sort of, what was that like? Did you get a chance to look around at some of the surrounding area, or?
It was part of my job to kind of explore around. When I first got to this spot up here, we were doing some geologic mapping, so we got to really explore around this big valley where you would see just mountains in every direction that you looked. There was like a snow-capped mountain because it was way up in the top of the Andes. We could see mountains that were 22,000 feet high in the distance. And, you know, it's because the average elevation was so high up there. We were sleeping around 15,700 feet. And most of the work area where this is around 17,000. It actually ended up, we looked it up, around the elevation of the Everest Base Camp was about where our work area elevation was. Okay. So, I mean, you know, even wherever we were, it didn't matter where we were. I mean, it was like, the view was like incredible. We could sometimes see in the distance thunderstorms over the Amazon, but it was like, it was below us. Yeah. Which was like really weird, being like above a thunderstorm.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like fascinating. Has that sort of helped you? Well, I think you've said it's helped you sort of in your area as a politician, but how has it been sort of legislating? And I know you said on the agricultural board, how has that sort of experience been? Has it been sort of tough, or something else?
You know, it's not that, it's not simple. Nothing's simple. Mm-hmm. It should be simple. Everything should be simple, but it's not. That was a big takeaway, you know, for me, really getting to understand how all this stuff works is that, just because, you think you have people that are going to be on your side and voting for you doesn't mean that's going to be the case. Just because, all the data shows that doing this is a good idea doesn't mean that you still have to make compromises, because it's an incredibly tight web that so many things are connected to, that when you change one little thing, the whole web kind of gets all messed up. So if you want to change one part of that web, you need to, do something different over there to make sure that, the web doesn't collapse if you take that part of the web out. And that's what, learning a lot about everything is really important. And I think that's one thing, like, I've had a really well-rounded experience in life and education and just being around a lot of different things, that I'm not an expert in anything, but I can be empathetic to a lot of people's views because I do know a little, I know enough. When I was in college, I worked for an organic farmer. He grew vegetables, and I did deliveries and all sorts of stuff on the farm, supporting his farming efforts. So I learned a lot about, the business of small farming. I learned about, how the markets work and all of these different things by having conversations about it with him and actually being part of doing that work. So, I worked in the hospitality industry at a hotel. So, I've gotten to know a little bit about that industry. And I worked in the airline industry for a short time as a ticket agent at an airport in New York when I was in college. I worked as a pharmacy technician in college at the hospital. So I learned a little bit about how hospitals work. I learned a little bit about, what goes on in the hospital, how the hierarchy of nurses and doctors and the bureaucracy and the billing behind what goes on in insurance. I mean, I'm not an expert in any of that stuff, but most people that have a very linear path in what they've done in their work, they don't have that real well-rounded perspective on a lot of things. And I think that that's really been important for my district because, I this second election, I actually didn't get 50% of the vote. I only got 48.7% of the vote, but there was a third party candidate took away some, and I would have preferred to have had more than 50% of the vote. But, that just shows you that, there wasn't quite half the people that trusted me to do the job. And that just means that I need to do my job better. That means that I need to, make sure that I'm looking out for the people in this district even more and doing what they need me to do. And I need to understand where it is they're coming from and where they're going. And I also have to make sure that I'm, able to sleep at night with the decisions that I make. That if there's something that I agree with or disagree with, and I have to vote for a way that I don't necessarily agree with, that I'm okay with that. And that's the reality of being a legislator. And there's a lot of things that when people who support you disagree with your decisions and say like, hey, well, we voted for you, we helped you get into office, why aren't you doing what we want you to do? And it's like, well, you're only part of the people who voted for me. I still have all the other people who I represent, and I still need to think about them. So when it comes to a lot of those issues in the ag industry, especially, it's a lot of people here don't understand anything about that stuff. And I have to, put my ag hat on and think about what their needs are and go to my experiences that I've had in those places to try to empathize with them, because they're not saying the things that they say because that's what they want to say. Like there's real reasons for the concerns that they have on stuff. Just like everybody has real concerns about things.
Yeah. So how would you say like some of the reception you've gotten from Arvada has been since you've been elected? Has it been like very positive? How has that happened?
Well, I got more votes than I did last time, so that was good. Even though I got less percentage, I got more votes, so that was always good. That's a very good thing. A lot of people, when I went to go visit them at their door when I was canvassing, a lot of people knew who I was. They already knew who I was. They already knew. They subscribed to my newsletter. They saw me on TV. I mean, they read about me in a newspaper or something. So a lot of people had already heard about me, and they were already big fans. So, but that's not everybody. I still have to win people over. I still have to, get people that didn't support me or don't know about me, and I have to convince them, why I'm good and why I'm going to do a good job for them. And that's, there's always that thing in the back of your mind that just because somebody's not nice to you to your face doesn't mean that they don't hate your guts as soon as you turn your back to them. And being a trans person could be the reason why they hate your guts. And I didn't get a lot of people saying horrible things to my face that often. It happened more when the political ads against me came out, which were really transphobic and personal attacks on me. That's when I got a lot more slurs yelled at me through windows as they drove by, and stuff on the internet and stuff like that. But for the most part, people, they like what I'm doing, and I'm really trying to. It's literally the hardest district to win. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. It doesn't matter what you do because you're wrong half the time. Because only half the people voted for you. So like half people don't like what you do. And sometimes, it's even more than that. And so I do consider myself to be kind of a people pleaser kind of a person. So when I can't make half the people happy, it's a little sad, I was like, I want people to be happy with what I do, but it's just ideological differences. It makes it virtually impossible to make everybody happy. And I have to just be okay with that and do the best work that I can and make as many people happy as I can, and realize that it's not going to always be that way.
That's very true. I'm sure that Arvada is very difficult to legislate too. So I suppose my other question would also be like, how have you found Arvada and in Colorado in general, sort of social spheres, like when you're not at work? How has, sort of what's have you sort of been doing there, and what kind of people have you met?
Well, I mean, most of the years I lived in Arvada in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of relationships with people. I knew a few of like my neighbors in my condo. Um, I still, even after being HOA president for 10 years, I still didn't know everybody who lived there. But it's just like, it's weird, it, it's kind of a little disheartening in a way that, you want, I want to know my neighbors. I want to, I don't know, I guess emulate what I see on TV where people have great relationships with their neighbors and stuff, and they hang out all the time and and stuff. But it's not like that. It's not, there's no reality like that where everybody's like, everybody's friends and everybody does stuff, and um people keep to themselves. Everybody's got different personalities, and you try to find the people and relate to them, and uh, make friends with them when you can. And the new place that I moved to is a new community, and um, the houses are still being built. So a lot of the people that have been coming in and moving in, it's kind of been fun to be like, hey, welcome, and really being proactive about that, because a lot of times in a condo you don't even know if somebody new is there. Like you you don't know who was there before, and then someone's new there you didn't even know. With a house, it's being built, like it's either occupied or not occupied. It's like, hey, it's an occupied house, someone lives there now, who are they, let's go meet them. So it's been a lot more fun to kind of really develop a neighborhood, and I'm really trying to create a community. And I don't think it's just me. I think a lot of other people kind of have the same idea. So, really trying to be encouraging on that, to really get people together more, and to participate. Because I think, like, over time, community has really been dissolving, and community um, is really essential. And I think if you've ever watched the show Alone, you ever watched that on the History Channel?
I don't think I have.
It's a competition. They send out 10 people into the wilderness, and they drop them off by themselves. And they just have like the stuff in their backpack, and they have to live there as long as they can. And the last person to live there the longest wins. And it's kind of a real eye opener about how interconnected people are, and how much we really need each other. As much as like we don't. I can be in my house all day long, and like for a year and never leave, and I'll be fine, and I could do whatever I need to do. But I go to the grocery store to get my food because I can't grow my own food, right? All the people that are there, that work there, that are contributing to that, the people who work in the fields, and the people who deliver the stuff to the store, it's like all of the people who touch the things that we have in our lives. And that show Alone really shows that if you try to do it alone without anybody else, it sucks. It's hard. It's like, one person goes to collect the water, one person goes to collect the food, one person hunts for the rabbits, and everybody kind of does their part. When you're doing it all by yourself, it's really hard. So one of the things I really am trying to do is try to spur on little bits of community and get more people working together, and realize that, through my my experience of volunteering and being part of, trying to make wherever I am a better place, is that if we all really do that, we can have a really, really great place. But if we all contribute to it, that's when it really makes a difference. If only a couple people are out there collecting the trash, well, the trash is going to blow back and it's going to be there again. So if we take turns, we won't have to look at that trash anymore. We'll have a nice clean park. But we all have to kind of do it. And it's about making habits and things like that. So there's a lot of things that I've been trying to do in my own neighborhood to try to really bring things together. And I do a lot of events where as a legislator, I just say, I'm going to be at this brewery and you can come by and just hang out and I'll buy you the first beer. And I just, want people to feel like they can talk to me and that I'm a regular person and I have, I have things to contribute and stories, and I'm curious about learning about people, learning about them. Every time that you talk to somebody new, you don't just learn about them, you learn about yourself. And I learned that a long time ago. And it's like, even when you're doing all the talking, like I've been doing right now, like I've learned a few things about myself too, because I've kind of done an analysis on a couple things. Sometimes it's only a couple really small questions that can lead to a lot of discovery, and I like discovery. That's fun. It's new things are great. So I just like to try to encourage that kind of stuff in and around the community, because I think that community is a good thing and we still need it as much as we've been detached from one another from the internet before COVID, and now the internet's connecting us again. It's kind of a weird thing that we were all communicating this way before, and now it's like the only way we can communicate. And I think people, it's a kind of an eye opener. It's like we kind of come full circle.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. Yeah. I'm curious now, what have been your interactions with the trans community of Colorado at large? Have you done a lot of work with them as well?
I try to do as much as I can, participate in the marches, speak at events, whether it's here in Colorado or elsewhere. I try to say yes to everything that I can. I'm on the board of a nonprofit called TIES, Trans Youth Education and Support. It's a organization that helps families with trans kids to try to navigate, how do we do this? Well, a lot of parents don't know anything about it until they have a kid who's trans, and now they have to figure out how to be a good parent. And then I am also on a board of another nonprofit called Transcending 7, and Erin Parisi is a trans woman who's working on being the first openly trans person to climb all 7 highest peaks in the world. And so I'm helping her with the nonprofit that she's involved with there, to try to help her achieve her goals and to help reach more trans kids and inspire them to do big things like that. And that's, the position that I have now, I think is important to, as I said before, just to use it as much as I can for good while I'm here, because term limits and all that stuff, nothing's certain. I know I can maybe not win the next election. Who knows? I just gotta try to do what I can while I'm there, and Yeah, I talked to a lot of the GSAs and schools. Um, I want more people to know that they can reach out to me and ask me to go talk to them or talk to their group, because I'll say yes. I'll do it. And I'll have fun with it. And it's great because, I know I'm making a difference. People have told me. And, that just keeps me wanting to do more, because I'm making a difference. The minute I stop making a difference anymore, just like tell me to shut up and go away, and I will. But as long as I'm making a difference, I'm gonna just keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I I love that you're so open with the trans people of Colorado. It's what has your experience been like on the boards of some of these nonprofits like Ties? How has that work sort of impacted your legislating?
You know, not that much really, because a lot of the things that we've already accomplished were already done before I got involved. There's still a few things that, I don't know if can be completely solved at the state level, that really have to be federally driven. And maybe those things will start to happen now. But it's, you know, I just want more people to, my biggest contribution that I'm hoping to do with that group is to help them raise money, help get more visibility, help, if I can introduce more families to get involved, that I'm setting them up for success. And that's really what it's all about. And, if a family's, not knowing what to do, and they have a resource, I can point them to the resource, and then I can help to raise money for the group to provide those services that they provide, support groups and camps and stuff like that, to make sure that we're giving a lot of the youth right now, the trans youth especially, the resources and the support that they need, because it's not a fully supportive environment. Society is.
Yeah.
It's not. Society is not fully supportive of them. So, we need to make sure that we're giving them the tools that they need to feel like that they're more supported than they might be if they didn't have it. Because there's still a lot of work to do in gaining acceptance, and that's another part of what my goal is.
Okay, yeah, I'm I'm glad to hear that you're doing this really important work. It's obviously very hard work, and I guess the other thing I want to ask is like, did you ever like expect yourself when you started transitioning? Did you ever expect yourself to sort of be where you are now?
I had no idea. I had no clue. I didn't know what I was gonna do Tuesday. It was just I this was the realization that really, I'll just kind of paint it for you. Like,
Mhm.
the FBI thing was like, that was the thing that I was like, I was willing to give up everything in my life to do that work.
Mhm.
I mean, really think about it. If you do that work, a lot of stuff you can't talk about, you can't have a social life, you can't do a lot of stuff. It's like, you just need to do your work, shut your mouth, and do your work again. This is basically what that job is about. But it didn't matter, because if I was helping to solve problems, that was that was part of what I'm going to be doing for everybody. It was like I was that cog in that machine to keep the machine running. And when I turned 37, I was in Mexico. I'm always in Mexico. I was in Zacatecas, Mexico, on my birthday, and I was there. There were a couple other English-speaking people on the site. There were these two Canadian guys, and I said, "Hey, it's my birthday today." You know, thinking that they'd be like, "Oh, let's get a beer or let's celebrate." And they're like, "Oh, happy birthday. See you later." And then they just left, right? So like here I was, you know, by myself with like nobody else in this city that, you know, I didn't really feel that comfortable because it wasn't like there was a lot of there was a guy who was actually kidnapped on the mine site like a few weeks before. So, you know, I was being cautious. I didn't want to venture too far away from the hotel. And I was sitting there on my birthday eating dinner, having a margarita to try to feel better about myself, but it was like that was the beginning of the end. It was like that was like what I've tried for so long was ending. It was over. I couldn't do it anymore. And that was the big turning point. And that was a wake up for me. It was like there's nothing, you have to do something completely different now. And there was really no turning back. But it was like you go out there and you're on this, you go through a doorway and there's this big long passageway with an abyss below you, and this walkway goes on forever and you can't see it, but the door closed behind you and you can't open it up again. So you only have one place to go. You walk down that walkway, or you fall off the edge into the abyss. And you know, you don't want to do that. So you walk on your walkway and you go to the end and you see what's there and you deal with it. And that's what I had to do. I said, I know this life that I was trying to lead, it ended up not being where I need to be. And now I'm going someplace else, and I'll figure it out when I get there.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people have had that sort of similar moment. Um, I'm also curious which people in your life really sort of got you through that.
Yeah, you know, it was hard because I didn't have a lot of friends, but I ended up finding a group of people who were runners, and I started hanging out with them, and they were, you know, an open-minded group of people, and they, you know, they would do runs on Halloween and like all these different things, and they would dress up and stuff, and just because they wanted to dress up funny, it was like a theme to their run. So, you know, they would be outrageous all the time. So it felt fine for me to be even myself, even though they might view it as outrageous. But then it wasn't outrageous anymore. It was just like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, that looks good. Yeah, is that new? You know, it was. Um, I I challenged everybody one time by running a trail in high heels, and they thought I couldn't do it. My feet hurt a lot, but I did do it.
Yeah.
And that group of people really they really helped me to feel like I belonged. And that was all I really wanted, was to feel like I belonged somewhere. Didn't matter who. And I think that's the problem with a lot of groups these days who, are getting mixed up in a lot of these extremist groups because they feel like they belong in these extremist groups too. Because the people are looking to find belonging. And that's an important realization I'm gonna have to take with me to my next conversation. But yeah, it's it made a difference. I mean, I kind of thought my parents and my family would be okay, and they ended up being fine. But I spent so much time really being not necessarily like alone or on my own, but with a very, very small amount of people in my life. When I worked in New York, when I went to Binghamton and I was in a hotel, I got to go eat someplace. I don't have a kitchen. I can't make my own food. I had to go out to a restaurant. And then, how many? Just me. Oh, really? Just you? Yeah, just me. Just me. So I got used to being with very few people, and I was okay with a few people as long as those few people I could trust, and I could confide in them, and that's really kind of where I really said I want to stand my ground on with the people around me that I have, and if the rest of the world falls apart, I've got these people here, and I'm okay with that. And that's kind of how I just went.
I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like it was very, very supportive. Were they very supportive when you started to come out?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of them showed up when I had my name change party, and I did my coming out on Facebook party, and I told everyone on Facebook, which I had held back for a while because there were a lot of people that Facebook, you have people who you don't really talk to very much, and you don't know like what they're really thinking about. So I held off at that for a while, but yeah, they were very supportive, and were with me every step of the way, and still very supportive now.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Um, I get you brought up your parents, and I'm a little bit curious if you could tell me a little bit more about both of them.
Yeah, my parents, they live in Tucson.
Hmm.
They're both retired. My mom used to work for the IRS, and my dad used to work for the state of New York as a tax collector. I know it's two tax people in one family. It's a very taxing childhood. But they were very supportive. They found out that I was cross-dressing when I was a teenager, and they really didn't know what to do. They were very good about it. I mean, looking back at how I remember that happening, they were very understanding. They were just curious. I want to find out what's going on, and oh, let's go talk to somebody. Let's go talk to a therapist. And we did all that. But I mean, look, a teenager, is going to be traumatized by that, no matter how good you do it. If that, if it's something like, that society has said is wrong and is a joke, and that's all you hear and then even if your parents, are being supportive and understanding about it, I still have to answer to society, and society said this is no good, and I'm panicking now.
Mhm.
So it was hard to make any kind of headway there. It just kind of, the societal norms really clamped down on me at that point, because I just felt like it just so ashamed and embarrassed by what happened. And then, I tried to not be myself for like, I don't know, a couple weeks, maybe tops. And then, I was back to being who I was, but even more secretly. But they were always there. They were always very understanding. When I finally came out, I went to visit my family down in Arizona. My mom took me shopping, and that was nice. We got to go shopping for some stuff together. So yeah, they're just, whatever, as long as you're not doing something to hurt somebody else, and you're not breaking any laws, be yourself, do what you want, do what you need to do to be happy, and I'm happier. So they're cool.
Good, good. I think I'm coming to the end of the questions I had for you. Is there any other sort of holes in the story that you want to fill in? Is there any other like things you want to make sure you get in?
Well, there's one little anecdote that was kind of funny. When I was going through the FBI application process, I met a few people along the way, and I actually had a couple of them as roommates for a while, because they were sort of displaced. And my friend Sam, he was staying with me when President Obama was coming through on his re-election tour in 2012. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. He's going to be in Golden. Like, we should get some tickets and go see the president, because I mean, the two of us were thinking, like, we would totally jump in front of a bullet for the president, even if we weren't Secret Service or not. And that was the job we were looking for. So he's like, yeah, that'd be cool. Let's go see the president. So I got tickets to go see to the event. And when we got there, they said, would you like to sit behind the president during the speech? And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we're like, yeah. Like, you don't even know like how lucky you asked, because if anything bad happens, we're right there. We'll be the first ones to, take down any kind of shenanigans that are going on.
Yeah,
So it was pretty cool. We were
yeah.
right behind the president during his one speech when he came to Golden, like right behind him. It was pretty cool.
Cool. Have you ever, with moving kind of forward, have you had any experiences sort of, I guess, like that in terms of like the current president? Have you sort of had any interactions that, or any interactions with his supporters that you would, want to talk about?
President Trump. You're frozen.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yes, yeah.
President Trump. I kind of avoided President Trump stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that probably 99.9% of the time, someone who supports President Trump's probably not going to support me. But I do know of at least one exception to that, because they told me they were going to vote for Trump and vote for me this time. But no, I haven't really had any close close things with the current president. However, in the when the election was going on for the last election, I did get to meet quite a few of the presidential candidates on the Democratic side. Except for Biden. He was the only one I never met. I met like everybody else, but I never met him. But one thing that was pretty cool, you familiar with the LGBTQ Victory Fund?
Yes, I am.
Well, I go to the conferences that they have in DC, and Mayor Pete Buttigieg was there, and I got to meet him there. I was in New York for World Pride, and I got to meet him again there. And when the tail end of this election was coming up, I met him again in Colorado. I was just sitting someplace in my house here, and I got this random call, and I'm like, Indiana? Who's calling me from Indiana? And I pick up the phone, and it's Mayor Pete. And he just like randomly called me. Well, it turns out it wasn't that random. Like somebody asked him to call me. And he was like, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing, and grateful to have you representing, the trans community and the people in Colorado. And we're really rooting for you for this election to get reelected. And we chatted for a little bit, and now he's going to be the Secretary of Transportation.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, that's very cool. Is there are there any incidents? How's your sorry, like coming up with questions? It's not that coherent, but I'm wondering how you sort of found the Colorado political landscape. Have you had to interact with some of the big players there?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's I've the governor, Governor Polis, he was actually the first person to call me to congratulate me in 2018, and one of the first ones to call me in 2020 as well. He's been a really good supporter and really, understands the importance of, what I represent for trans people, just like what he represents for, the gay communities, being the first openly elected gay governor. And then, I've met just about everybody. One time when I was out in DC, Congressman Neguse organized a nice little tour for us of the Capitol. So we were there one evening, going down through the tunnels underneath and looking at all the history spots. So it was like having a private tour with a congressman explaining all the different things, which was really, really cool, because I had been to the Capitol before and never really had time to even go on the tours. And even when you can go up into the gallery, like you can't bring a cell phone or anything. Even when you're on the floor of the house with a congressman, you still can't take pictures, by the way. So nobody takes pictures on the floor of the house, no matter what. Even the Congress people are not supposed to do it, and they can get fined for it. But it was just a really fun, interesting, just to be there with somebody from Colorado, someone who represents a good portion of Colorado, and he's just a really, really great guy. He's just really cares a lot about people, and he goes out of his way to do good things, which I really appreciate, because I try to do the same thing. So I feel like we're definitely on the same wavelength, except he's much cooler than I am.
I mean, I wouldn't say that. You're still very cool.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, one more time, is there anything else you want to put in before we start to wrap up?
I was so disjuncted that I can't remember if there was anything important that was left out.
Well, if we want to take a trip back memory lane, you told me about Hudson Valley. I do just question popped back into my head. When you said you were doing your PhD, was there a reason why you decided not to do that the first time around?
Oh yeah. So there's politics in universities too. And so the professor that I was supposed to do my experimental work with, he has a mineral named after him. He's this brilliant guy. And there was the only place in the department that really fit with what I wanted to do. Like, this is the guy. Like, I'm so lucky to have the guy to work with. And he was he had just recently got on a grant with another professor to do similar work. And apparently, politically, you can't be on two different projects with the same kind of result. And so he couldn't advise me on the project anymore. And, not having the guidance of someone that was like the guy for the job, I kind of felt like I didn't know where to go anymore. And I was at a point where I had to make major changes to what I was going to do, try to really shift things around and try to make it work. Or I was at a perfect halfway point and I could just stop there. And it made sense just to stop there, because I didn't feel like messing around with all the other, like, trying to juggle this and that and get somebody else to advise me, which wouldn't have the knowledge that I needed. It just seemed too messy. So I just decided to stop.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
one other thing now is that a lot of people don't know about me is when I was in college, among the many things that I did for work, I already went through a lot of the list. I was working like 2 jobs and taking 18 credits a semester.
wow.
And I wasn't doing that great. I was getting B's and C's and stuff, but I did turn it around and I still was working. But one of the things I was doing on top of all that was I was on the radio station. I was actually started out with an AM radio show. We had an AM and FM station. The AM station, you could pretty much do whatever you wanted because it was such a weak signal. Nobody could hear you screw up. And you start there, and then I worked my way up to doing the news. I was a news producer and read the news for the 7 o'clock hour. And I also had a music show that I did in the 3 to 5 a.m. slot. And I mean, I don't know why I did this. Like, it was, I didn't need this, but it was fun.
Yeah.
I had to get certified, you know, to be an FM broadcaster, all these FCC things. And I had the great responsibility of switching the transmitter over to the NPR station. So if I didn't push the button, NPR wouldn't be on that day. So it was a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
But that was fun. You know, nobody ever called me for my free swag giveaways. Not a lot of people awake at that hour. But it was fun. It was, you know, it's like I did a little bit of improv and theater in college. I always had an interest in theater and performance, which I think also plays very well with politics as well. I have, as I mentioned once before, I do a little bit of writing. I do a little creative writing. I wrote 2 novels for National Novel Writing Month. I completed the 50,000 words in a month twice. And I wrote another novel before that that's still, I mean, they're all not finished. They're not that great. They need a lot of editing. And now I started writing again because I have a lot of ideas. I think there's a lot of, I mean, creativity and humor. I find a lot of value in, and I think that humor can be a really great tool that you can use, especially in politics. If you've ever listened to any of my floor speeches in the well, I've done many puns down there. And, you know, it's just, we do a lot of very serious things in the Capitol, but, you know, we have to be able to look at ourselves and laugh. And I think that helps me get through some of the tougher times when it's stressful, is to find the humor in things. And I think that's something I want to try to channel a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, the floor of the Senate, of the Colorado Senate, could definitely use it. Or Colorado House of Representatives could definitely use it.
Well, the Senate definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. Oh, I did want to also ask you. You said you had that radio show in college, and you were doing theater. How was sort of that college experience? Or you sort of, you know, if you want to expand on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, you know, it wasn't quite the experience that a lot of people have when they go away to school. And I commuted, so I drove to school. I was there like all day long, and then I went to my job, and then did my homework, went home. Yeah, I really wasn't a partier. I didn't go to a lot of parties. I didn't really participate in a lot of the clubs. I wanted to swim. I was a swimmer in high school. I wanted to be on the swim team. But it was like 2 practices a day, and I had to drive there all the time. It wasn't just like walk from your dorm to go swimming. It was, I had to drive 17 minutes each way, at 6 o'clock in the morning to go swim and then go back again. And it was just not convenient to do. It didn't work with my schedule. I really liked theater. I liked that experience. I was put in with the theater group when we did orientation, because I was undeclared, and they're like, yeah, well, usually you go with the science people and the math people and the history people, and it was like, you're a nothing person, so we need a few extras in the theater group, which actually worked out really well to my advantage. It was probably the more fun group. They were, I learned a lot about just people and creativity and kind of free thought and stuff like that from them. And I didn't learn it at the time. I learned it later. I was too closed-minded to really, because I was closed-minded on myself. I couldn't accept myself for who I was, so I couldn't accept anything else either. I wish that I had a little more insight on that. That's what I would probably tell my past self, is to like really pay attention to the thought that's happening in university and the conversations and everything, because there's a lot of discovery of people and ideas and feelings and everything else that I missed out on.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. Well, I don't think I have any other questions for you. Just one more time to make sure. Is there anything else that you would like in this?
I don't know, probably not.
No. Okay. We can follow up if you want.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This has really been a pleasure to talk to you. I will get you the recording of this, and we will hopefully speak again soon.
All right. Well, cool. Yeah. Nice chatting with you, and reach out anytime.
Yeah, will do. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.